Talk human to me.
Talk human to me.
Talk human to me.
Human to me.
Talk human to me. Talk human to me.
Welcome to the Talk Human to Me podcast,
where entrepreneurs open up to questions beyond their ideas and ventures.
Who are they really?
And why do they do what they do?
It didn't mean your friendship had ended. It had just mean that the circumstances in which that friendship existed had shifted.
What's up, beautiful humans? It's Jeff Xiao here, your Talk Human to Me host. So we find that doers, creators, and makers often look for podcasts that offer up insights into entrepreneurship. Although each of our guests are incredible entrepreneurs, we talk with them about everything but entrepreneurship. This podcast wants to remind you about all the other parts that make you a complete human being, like our emotions, hobbies, mental health, philosophy, and where we grew up. And most entrepreneurs and colleagues know Ben Wong, AKA Von Wong, as a world-famous storyteller that finds magical stories and makes them go viral. You can find his magic at Von Wong, that's VONWONG, on all social media. However, all that went out the window. We just wanted to talk with Ben the human. And Ben the human thinks about things like the unlimited range of flexibility in which people can change and stretch over time, and that ultimately to just aspire to tell a great story no matter what your situation. So if you're an entrepreneur, doer, maker, or creator looking to balance out your podcast playlist, listen in as Ben Von Wong sits down to talk human to me. Okay, let's get started. I am super stoked to be here today with another person I literally just met, probably less than 2 weeks ago, right? I think we were just chopping it up at Christine Lai's house. I think a lot of listeners probably know Christine Lai just because she is a friend to the Earth, to planet Earth. And we just started chatting, and I just started gawking over the amazing photos that you've taken just kind of recently for a really cool project. I don't know if it's a secret project, so I don't want to talk about it. But
It
we're
should
not
be released by the end of this month.
Very cool, very cool. But yeah, as a predecessor, we're not going to talk about it during this episode because everyone knows what this podcast is about. So, but I'll let you guys know the website in the beginning and the end of the podcast. So, we start every episode with the exact same question. So this is going to be completely new to you because this podcast is completely new for you.
Mm-hmm.
And the question I start with everybody is, what about humans strikes you the most?
What about humans strikes you the most? I think I would have to say is the unlimited range of flexibility in which people can stretch and change over time that I find particularly interesting.
Stretch and change.
Yeah. So people evolve, and they can be so resilient, but they can be so fragile all at the same time. And I find that really interesting to be able to watch how much somebody could achieve, or how deep they can fall, or how quickly they might break, or there's just this huge spectrum of the potentials, both in either direction, of human capabilities that I think is really, really fascinating.
And when you're talking about capability, are you talking about like the capability? Do you think that this capability and this dimension of changing and almost like morphing, would you say it's throughout different ages, throughout different experiences? Is it extremely malleable just through anything like relationships, in beliefs, in...
Well, yeah, it's just about everything. You can live a certain way your entire life and charge down a route with a super firm belief. And that can give you strength, it can give you compassion, it can give you the willpower to achieve anything. And then the minute that faith is broken, hypothetically, you can completely revert 180 degrees in the complete opposite direction. And that possibility of change is just really fascinating to me, how, you know, one single point in time, one single action can change everything. Whether that's to unleash someone's potential or to break them down, change the course of their life. And I guess I'm particularly fascinated in it because I'm always trying to figure out what my potential is, constantly frustrated at where I'm at to hopefully get me to the next place. And I think that's a really interesting thing to watch others. So I quite like...
When you're saying the next place, because you just said it's the change and the evolution usually happens when some sort of construct in your head was shattered and broken.
Right.
So is that what you're constantly looking for, like some construct in your head to be is it when you're saying shattered or broken, I seem like proven wrong? Like, for example, here's a very innocent example. As a kid, you're told by your parents Santa's real, right? And then that construct is shattered usually. Well, actually, for people out there who are adults and they still believe Santa's real, I'm sorry, Santa's not real. But that construct is shattered, and then you're looking for, as a child, like, well, what's the new meaning of a world without Santa? Oh, I guess I'm learning about generosity now. Like, oh, that means all these gifts you came from this, a real person.
Yeah, I think I was looking at it a little bit on a larger scale, because there are all sorts of defining moments in time where you look back on someone's life or your own, and you kind of pinpoint these independent instances where everything changed, or your perception on the world changed, or something clicked in your mind, and because of that click, you go somewhere else. So I kind of liken it to a creative block. You really want to create something, and for some reason you cannot figure out what that key piece of the puzzle is, the bridge to go to the next place. But then you experiment, and then just like that, a light bulb goes off, and then suddenly you're at peak efficiency, right? This idea of toggling between one mode and the other. So if I go back to my childhood, for example, I traveled a lot when I was younger, been to 13 different schools in 3 different countries and 3 different languages.
13 different schools from K through 12, or?
No, just throughout including university.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just moved around a lot because my parents, my dad was an aeronautical engineer, and so every time
what does that mean exactly?
He was working on flight simulators, so those basically virtual reality.
Oh, I remember. It's like that giant like case where you sit in there and it kind of moves around.
Exactly. Yeah, it's basically like $1 million cube on hydraulics that simulates any type of airplane with a full internal cockpit and like exactly the same monitors that you would expect, except back in the days there was, I don't know, CRTs or whatever, but it's basically the first virtual reality machines, if you will. And so my dad would fly around and help these different airline companies install their generation of flight simulators, and so the entire family would tag along wherever these adventures were. And my parents did it because they believed that it would be good to expose us to different cultures, and I think it definitely did that. But for me, what I remember as particularly jarring was just having to lose and create new friends every time. And this is pre-email, pre-cell phones.
How often was it? So is it like a few months and then you go, or is it like a year and then go?
It would depend. So we would have 4-month trips, 6 months, sometimes 2 years, sometimes a year and a half, sometimes 4 years.
Did the friends from the previous place always just kind of like, oh, well, bye, Ben, and then just never talk to them again?
Well, that's the thing. So in the initial stages, you try to hold on to it. And back in the days, for me, it was, and I'm not that old, I'm 30 years old, right? But
yeah.
But this is still pre-email days, right? So how we would keep in touch was like snail mail or occasional phone calls on birthdays or special events to catch up with people. And you hold on to these relationships really tightly. And I don't know exactly what the instant in time was. I think this was probably pretty late by the time I hit university where I finally became okay with the idea of just letting go of people instead of trying to hold on to these relationships really tightly, because it would just be so painful every time you would make friends and lose friends. And it was this constant cycle of being like, oh no, we're never going to see each other again. Or, you know, you feel that process of drifting apart is so acute. And you just feel it like really drift, and you can hold on, you can try to hold on, you can try to reconnect. And you just keep drifting. And so somewhere along the lines, I think this was probably in university, maybe about 19 or 20 years old. I went to work in a mine in Labrador City. I was a mining engineer. That's my background. So I was working
You're a mining engineer.
Yeah, I studied mining engineering.
So does that mean like study of
like hard rock mining? Not data mining.
So is
Canadian. Not San Francisco.
So mining, is that like when you're studying? So is it kind of what's that science where the study of rocks?
It's like geological engineering, sort of the same, except I was focused specifically on the extraction of resources from the ground. Mine was specifically in hard rock, so iron, gold, silver, anything that was a harder rock. Coal, for example, is a soft rock. Yeah, so someone needs to figure out how much it's going to cost. How do you get there? You know, what methods are you going to use? What equipment are you going to use? What's the strategy? How much do you expect to extract from the geological models, etc.?
So you mentioned Canada. So this was, you were studying in Canada?
So I'm Canadian.
Yes.
And I've spent about half my life overall in Canada, Montreal specifically. And I studied university at McGill University, which is in Montreal. And I was in a co-op program. So my travels actually continued throughout university. I did 8 months of school, 4 months of internship somewhere exotic, 8 months of school, 4 months of internships, 4 months of school, 4 months internship, 4 months of school, 4 months internship. So even my university life was extremely broken up, where the friendships would also wilter as you traveled every single time. So
what was that? Were you used to that, or did something like almost crumble in you each time that happened?
Well, that's the thing. So I'm not sure. I don't think it was like it was probably just a slow like letting go of this idea that you had to hold on to your best friend that you had made at this place, to just accepting that it was the way things were, where you just moved from one place to the other. And it didn't mean your friendship had ended. It had just mean that the circumstances in which that friendship existed had shifted now. And, you know, if I were to see a person I had gotten along with tomorrow from 10 years ago, we would probably get along and catch up, and it would be awesome. But then I'd say goodbye, and there wouldn't be any sadness associated to it. And I think what I learned how to let go of was that sadness that accompanied parting of ways in my friendships.
So the concept of proximity was something that just, you realize like that's something I don't necessarily, that's not a real thing in friendship. Friendship is the forging of, like, I guess I'm trying to understand what does friendship mean to you?
That's an interesting one. So I guess I don't have, so for a person who's grown up in the same place for 30 years or 20 years, and who's grown up and has these friends from birth, they have this very tight bond, I'd say almost like family. I just don't have those. So I have a lot of ease in making new friends, new acquaintances, friendships. And I kind of struggle to draw the line between what's an acquaintance and what's a friend, and when does a friend become a good friend, and when does a good friend become a best friend. But they seem to, but I think that's something that maybe a lot of people also encounter as they shift from a life of school to a life of work to a job, then become family. They also lose that idea of these communities that they might have cultivated from a younger age. So in some ways, I think everyone has to tackle this issue, which may result in some form of loneliness. but I just don't really get lonely, I think is the point. I don't feel that my friendships are any less valuable, but at the same time, I guess I also don't ask things out of people. So
Do you not ask things out of people because of the just the nature of being like, oh, you're constantly moving, so what is there to ask for? You kind of learn to find your own resources.
Right. I think not asking is actually the wrong thing. I ask, but I don't expect. So I always reach out for help if I need it, without the expectation that someone's going to turn up to assist. I mean, you hope. So if I am traveling to a new city and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for recommendations, or hey, I'm looking for a place to stay, if someone can help me, it would be great. If they're a good friend, I would hope that they would make time to see me. If not, that's fine too. But my friendship is not conditional on these circumstances. So yeah, I don't really know how to measure friendship. I guess so long as you feel like it's someone that you can trust, that would have the better of intentions, maybe not the best of intentions, but the better of intentions, who's a good person, is probably the best way to frame it.
Do you have siblings?
I have one sister. She's the normal one. She's got a job. She's married. She's got a house. She's
older?
She's younger, actually.
How much younger?
She's 18 months younger. So
okay.
Basically, we're almost twins.
Were you the close siblings that fought until a certain age, or were you close throughout your whole life, or was it actually distant? And that's actually I haven't heard of siblings that were that close together in age that are distant.
So we were close, and I think we've slowly grown apart. We were close, like always arguing when we were younger, and then at some point we started drifting apart, and our interests got also quite different from one another. So she's really into
what
like
was the
rock
drifting?
climbing.
What do you mean by drifting?
I'm not sure. I think we just drifted apart. At one point, she always wanted to do the same things as I did, and then at some point, it was close around the teenage years, she just started having her own interests, her own circle of friends, and she's a lot more of an introvert. I'm a little bit more of an extrovert. So I go out and she would have like one or two really close friends, and I would be the complete opposite. I would just have a bajillion friends, none of which were necessarily particularly close or whatnot.
So did she have this, because I mean, I'm assuming she also had the same moving patterns as you growing up.
Yeah.
That's interesting. No, it's just interesting. Like, it's just seeing you, because you see two people within the same construct of growing up, right?
Yeah.
And she was seeking. It seems like she seeked stability at some point. I don't want to call it stability, where it's like you said, like she has a house, she has a job, like a normal job, things like that, right? And then for you, it's let's use the word nomad. Is that accurate? Like you like to traverse the world and capture things, right?
I think I'm just pretty untethered in general. Yeah, I don't think I've stayed more than 6 weeks in a single place for the last few years.
Do you think it's a form of is it an adrenaline rush?
I don't know. So I never liked traveling when I was younger. It was something I was never excited about. My parents would always, I don't know. I just wanted to read my books or play. I never. Yeah, like I was huge into like fantasy and science fiction books when I was younger.
What was the most memorable one?
I had like read every single Star Wars book, Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance. Like those were the series that I would really get into and just devour an entire series because it had like hundreds of books.
Okay, so we have a real, true opinion of Star Wars. What did you think of Episode 7?
The Force Awakens?
Yes.
I actually quite enjoyed it. I like the direction that things are going, in that I feel like the series has been brought closer to what it should be. I thought the story was redundant, but in a way it was a way to bring the older and newer generations together and kind of, bring them together. And that from that point forward, sure, I mean, there are some character development wise and all that could have been a little better, but I actually thought that this was a great reset for like, okay, now let's start over. We've gotten over all the nostalgia. Now we can actually like be serious. So I hope I'm correct, but who knows?
That's what I'm hoping to. I think this was a let's forget about Jar Jar Binks. And
Exactly. It was like a reset. It's like, okay, this is the tone. Let's get serious.
And Rogue One.
Yeah, Rogue One. I thought Rogue One was pretty good too. I wish they didn't try so hard on the action scenes and actually focused more on the logic behind it. I mean, you land on the planet there with 20 commandos, and then your 20 commandos are running around from the biggest army in the world forever. It's like, okay, come on, guys. Yeah. I think there's potential.
Yeah.
But it's growing into this huge industrialized franchise. So at the end of the days,
I mean,
whatever sells.
It's the
right?
Disney machine, right?
It is the Disney machine. But they've done a far better job than the direction like George Lucas was taking it.
Oh, hands down.
Yeah.
I actually think it's I know we're. I want to go back to what we were talking about, the relationship. But no, it's just because it's actually just made me. One thing that's really fascinates me lately is the intention of representation of faces and voices in Disney produced movies. So, whenever there's something that is connected with Disney, like Marvel, Disney, Pixar, there is a lot of intention with what type of faces we're seeing, what type of voices we're seeing. So the next Pixar movie is about, I think is it a Mexican boy, or I forget if it's I'm not sure. It's one of the Latin American countries, right? Coco. That's the next. He's the main character, and actually all the voice actors are themselves also Latinx, right? So,
what happens? What do you think happens when they voice over into different languages? Do they have to find a Mexican accent Chinese guy? Because they voice over every single Disney movie into, I don't know, 150 different languages.
I've actually I was on Netflix, and I think I did this with a few of the Marvel shows.
Yeah.
You know how they have the audio setting? So I actually was like, oh, I want to see what the German and all the other ones sound like. I actually think it's just they do a pretty shitty job.
Yeah.
Because
they just try to.
I actually don't think a lot of them are voice actors.
Really?
I think because usually when there's a very intentional, like, okay, we are for sure going to do this. So I'm going to guess Coco's going to have more intentional voice acting, meaning they're actually going to audition people rather than just get. It sounded like a bunch of the languages they had, like Japanese, French, German, all these things, but it just sounded like interpreters, not voice actors. But I think with Coco, they're probably going to get very intentionally. This film will be in English and in Spanish.
It probably depends on the movie and the audience, right? Because if you think about a Marvel movie and you look at the income generated by, say, a country like China, it dwarfs the English language one. So then it's probably a source of revenue. It's probably based on revenue. So their Chinese translation must be significantly better than their Portuguese translation, for example.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is very
so
true.
Actually, it maybe depends on the market size. Be curious to. This might be an interesting study to do.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, I remember the first time I watched Avatar was actually in Taipei.
Okay.
And it was in English.
Right.
Every single theater was in, because we watched it like 2 or 3 times when it came out. The only thing annoying about it, because all the theaters were in 3D, so you had to wear 3D glasses. But because it's a Mandarin or Chinese speaking crowd, there's subtitles.
Right.
I don't know if you ever tried to watch
hard-coded.
I don't know if you ever seen 3D and you're trying to watch
Chinese in 3D.
But then there's like subtitles like popping out the entire time. It's so distracting. It's really annoying.
No, I've never watched subtitled 3D in the past.
It sucks. It sucks.
I can imagine.
So let's loop back to wherever the hell we were talking about. Sorry, I think we were geeking out for a moment here, but that's totally fine. Whoa, I think we got some stompers upstairs.
Wow.
We're actually at the Impact Hub in San Francisco right now. There's this little hole of I think they're called privacy booths, where they're like basically phone booths. So we're recording here.
This is like Harry Potter's room, literally under a staircase.
Under the stairs. Awesome. Okay, so yeah, let's go back to we were talking about kind of the contrast of, although both your sister and you were in the same environment growing up, and you're saying you kind of I know you're saying you grew apart, meaning in interest, but would you say it's just like when I see my cousins after 15 years of not seeing them in person, if I go to Taipei and I see them, we're going to hang out exactly the same, like family, like really good friends. And we don't really have the same interests. It's just that emotional bond. I'm not sure if that's something that you also feel is kind of drifted apart with your sister.
I mean, with my sister, we don't have any animosity. I mean, like, I was there at her wedding. I hung her from a cliff. Everything was good. Took photos of her wedding, and we'll grab barbecues or go rock climbing together here and there.
Where is she right now, Ashley?
She's in Montreal.
Okay.
Yeah. But we don't really have much to talk about. We don't really she's in pharmaceuticals. Her husband's in dentistry. They do social aid, humanitarian travels here and there, but they also go on a lot of outdoor camping adventures, all of these things which I don't really do. So we don't have a single overlapping interest to share stories about or provide advice about or anything. So I think we have very platonic conversations, but they don't generally tend to go very much deeper. We're also at very different stages in our lives. I mean, she's basically had a job for about 3 to 4 or 5 years now, and I'm just like nomadic. And
Well, she's been in school for so long too, right?
No, my sister's like a genius. She skipped 2 grades, graduated from university at 20 from pharmacy. She got rejected from medicine at 17 because she was too young, not because her grades weren't good enough. And then she went to pharmacy out of spite because she was like, well, I'm going to do pharmacy instead. And then...
Jeez, what happened to you now?
Yeah, I know, exactly. Yeah, and then she got her master's a few years later. So I think by 23 or something, she was out with a master's. And yeah, my sister is pretty much, killing it. So she's been free doing her own thing for 5-6 years now.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, I think usually it's actually reversed. So the more stable, established, mature kind of career path-oriented individual is usually the older sibling, and for some reason, and then the younger one is a little rebel that's a little more creative and whatnot. Our role is just completely inverted for some reason.
So you never you never felt like, oh man, I have to make sure she's taking care of herself.
My sister is completely, she's always the more stable one that's had no problems doing everything. She's always excelled in everything.
Yeah.
And I'm not. I was always the chaos particle.
Where do your parents grow up?
My parents are Chinese Malaysian. They're first generation immigrants in
So
Montreal.
does Chinese Malaysian mean they grew up in Malaysia?
They grew up in Malaysia, but they're both ethnically Chinese.
Okay.
My dad grew up Christian, which means he speaks English. They went to English school. My mom grew up in a Buddhist family in Chinese, so she grew up with Chinese as her base language. And they met in university in Ontario, I think at York University. And they just found out they were both from the same township in Malaysia, and I guess that was the thing that drew them together.
What, I mean, if you were to look at your parents, I mean, where do you think, oh yeah, my sister is definitely more like mom or dad, or I'm definitely more like mom or dad? Like, actually, everybody's completely different from each other in our family.
It's hard to say because my parents are extremely safe. They're really frugal. They're very practical. They're very hardworking. They're very meticulous. And I would say that it's kind of a byproduct of survival. When they came to Canada for university, they both came with zero, and they built everything up from scratch. Whereas we have had the opportunity to grow up always having a roof over our heads, always having basically anything we wanted from an educational perspective. I mean, we never got like superfluous stuff, but like, you know, my parents were paying for our violin lessons when we were 4 or 5 years old, even though that was like $50 a lesson, that they would somehow find the budget for. But my mom like still cuts out coupons out of groceries, right? Even though they've managed to claw their way from like lower class to, I think, middle or upper middle class. And so my dad is very engineering, problem solving minded, but he's very slow. He's very deliberate. My mom's a lot more chaotic, very emotional, very spontaneous, but at the same time still very risk averse. So I don't really know whether I resemble any of my two parents in the entrepreneurial kind of floating nomadic personality, as well as like the ambitious, high, like very driven, and like all those components, I don't really know where it comes from. The closest that I can think of is maybe like my parents have always tried to give us every opportunity possible to develop ourselves and be productive and achieve whatever it is we set out to do in a sort of standard Asian way, you know, like go to every single class, get good grades and all this stuff. And I sort of always rebelled a little bit against that. So I'd say that the byproduct of me specifically is like a fusion of all of that. And my sister, I think, sort of maybe just because she's smarter, ended up really being able to internalize all the good grades and high performing. She's very studious. She's very practical, a lot less street smarts than me, a lot less technological smarts, but really, really book smart and sort of rigorous in her ways. So yeah, I think we're just different. I don't know.
So I'm trying to connect. Like, how did you go from a kid that wanted to stay in, read your books, your Star Wars books, and just hang out, and then suddenly just get antsy and like, now I need to just go outside? And
yeah, I think there are a few components to that. I think although as a kid that always wanted to stay home and read his books, deep inside I really wanted to be the characters that I was reading about, going on adventures. But I was never special enough to be the hero of my own life. And then so when I quit my job as a mining engineer in 2012, it was actually coincided with a breakup that I just had. And so I would say a component of the beginning of my travels, so this is 2012, where I really started traveling a lot under my own power.
what does that mean?
So my prior travels were all dictated by my parents or school or work. And in 2012, when I quit, it was like, oh, I want to go to X. I want to do Y. So it's completely intentional, self-funded, self-motivated travel.
This is just 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's when I became a full-time, I guess, vagabond. And so in 2012, I think a component of the travel was because of a breakup. I was just running away. As long as I was traveling, I wasn't thinking too much about the past. I was thinking a lot more about what I had to do in the future. It was a lot. Traveling brought me a lot more into the present moment instead of in my own head. And I think that was probably a huge component of what got me into new experiences. And then with that comes the self-confidence of being like, oh, I can go anywhere and things are going to work out. It's fine. And then along the way, like my kind of artistic career sort of blossomed, my social following grew, and I can basically fly anywhere in the world for free today, speak or teach, and have a place to stay. And, you know, that kind of self-reliance and self-confidence sort of came over time. And that's where I am today, I suppose.
Where was the first place you flew?
First place I went was Israel.
Why Israel?
So I had some points on my credit card, and I had like $350 of flight credit, and I had $700 of flight credit. So my return trip to Israel would basically cost me $50. So it was the farthest place that I knew someone that sounded exotic, that I had never been to, that I had a sofa to sleep on. And so I just thought, like, hey, why not go have an adventure? I'd never read anything about Israel before. I didn't know anything about it. Had done zero homework. So I literally landed there and went like, what should I do here? I just wanted to escape Montreal at that stage. And so this 2-week adventure turned out to be tons of fun. And I had so much fun there that I was like, 2
weeks.
Yeah, I was there for 2 weeks, came back, and I was like, that was a lot of fun. I want to keep traveling, but I don't want to pay for it myself because that's not sustainable. So I crowdfunded 10 grand to travel across Europe for a month and create a set of tutorials and photography adventures to share with the people who were supporting me. That worked out great. I came back, shot a few weddings, and I was like, okay, I want to keep traveling, but I don't want to ask people for money anymore. How can I earn money and travel? And I started doing workshops. So I would find a group of people, a photography club that wanted me there, and they would pay for my travel, put me up, have a few extra $100 in the pocket, and I would use that to get to the next place, and then teach, get a free place to stay, get a few $100, shoot something more, and then keep going from there. And so it was this journey of just traveling from one place to the other, entirely self-sufficiently. I mean, I don't think I was particularly profitable, but I wasn't losing money. So in the 5 years since I quit my day job, I'd never really had to touch my savings, which is pretty cool.
When you're going from place to place, and when you're like your first trip to Israel, I mean, clearly you've been in touch with all types of people, all types of human beings. And I don't know if this is the right assumption, but would you say, and also every possible imagined situation, meaning someone who is in a specific economic situation, or someone who is in a specific family situation, or
I've stayed at some pretty diverse spaces, sometimes even in the same city, to see different facets of it. I've been I can't say that I've experienced everything, because I've never stayed, for example, with a homeless person or someone who was in an abusive household, or like I've never seen atrocities committed. But I have definitely stayed in different income classes. Anything from millionaire like, okay, I think this is probably the coolest place I've stayed in. This was the house of an architect. There was a bed on top of a pool table with like a zebra head above me and these doll sculptures on the side, and I think a tiger rug on the bottom. that was in Thailand. That was pretty fantastic. But I've also stayed, when I was in Australia recently, we stayed over at a Sri Lankan family's house, and I taught the son how to spit fire, but the dad was a fire inspector.
Wait. Okay, we can't just brush over that detail. You taught his son how to spit fire.
Uh-huh.
Where did you learn how to spit fire?
I learned how to spit fire when I was in Montreal. I found some fire performers, and I was taking photos, and they offered to teach me how to spit fire, and I said, "Yeah, please."
Okay, go through what that feels like.
Fire breathing is really fun. It's dangerous, but it's dangerous in that it can kill you, but it's also not dangerous it's dangerous that, like, when you drive a car, it can kill you. So you just have to kind of be smart about it. You put liquid paraffin in your mouth. And
what's liquid paraffin?
It's just like a fuel. It's lamp oil.
Okay. What is that?
It tastes like olive oil.
Oh.
So it's just super oily but tasteless. If you get the odorless taste. You don't want the one with, like, citronella, for example.
Yeah. And it's not toxic?
It's got a little skull logo on it. I would say that it's not something you should do on a regular basis. Most probably. If you swallow it, you will get sick. So you should spit it out. Some people have, like, skin reactions to it as it dribbles down. There are no long-term effect studies of people who put paraffin in their mouth, so really, I don't know. The consensus generally is, like, as long as you spit it out, you should be okay. So you put liquid paraffin in your mouth. It just feels like super oily. You hold it in your mouth. You have a flaming torch on the other hand, and you bring the torch up as close as you possibly can, almost like you're gonna kiss it, and then at that point you spit out the paraffin, except that you spit it out as if you're playing a trumpet. So you try to create the fine percolated mist as much as possible. And as you breathe out, the mist becomes fire. You have to blow hard enough to project it far enough from your face, and you got this fireball. The interesting thing is you can't see how big your flame is. You don't actually know how big it is. That's all through experience. If it's too hot, you stop breathing. Fire stops when you stop spitting. If it's
so you feel the heat, right?
Oh yeah, you can definitely feel the heat. You know.
How many times have you had to grow your eyebrows back?
So my beard has caught on fire in the past. I've caught my hair on fire. I've caught my pants on fire. It actually takes a few, like, you probably have like a good 1.5 seconds to do something about a body part catching on fire before it hurts you. So if you catch on fire, usually you don't actually know it. Someone has to tell you you're on fire, or you see it, like, on the side of your peripheral vision that something's wrong. So you usually always want to have someone next to you with a wet cloth so they can just plop it on top of you. But I think, like, humans aren't particularly flammable. Your hair is very crispy and it just burns away, but it's not that bad. I usually wet my hair before to prevent that, and I'll wear glasses or sunglasses, which makes the photo look cooler but also protects your eyebrows and your eyelashes from the flames.
Do you remember the name of the person who taught you how to do this?
I think there were a few people who taught me, so now I'm not particularly sure. There's a guy called Robert who gave us proper lessons, Robert Sangis. I think there's also another friend called Romy, who's one of my models, who also taught me. Yeah. Good times. Okay. But yes, right, I forgot to say the dangerous things. So if the wind shifts and blows it into your face, the fire can blow through you, which is okay so long as you don't breathe in, because if you breathe in the fire, it incinerates your lungs. If you don't breathe in,
It incinerates your lungs because you have the...
it just like it just burns your entire your lungs,
Because
the little pockets
mist
of air.
is going into your lungs, or...
If you breathe in, you're actually breathing in the fire, right? So then
Oh my
your lungs
God.
cook. I have friends who know people who've died. No one I know has died from that. But basically, nothing ever comes in. So long as nothing comes in, you're fine. If the fire shifts and, blows into your face, the worst that you can expect is like a slight burn. It's fine. Just like...
That's so awesome.
Yeah, anyways.
Okay, so I think we were talking about... I just love how you brushed over that small thing. It's like, oh yeah, so I was.
Oh yeah, the Sri Lankan family in in Australia who I taught how to spit. The son to spit fire, and the father was a fire inspector. So that was pretty funny. We were spitting fire in his backyard. He wasn't too happy. But yeah, no, I get to stay at all sorts of people's houses, and it's really cool. To the point where. Now that I have a space here in San Francisco, I have a bunk bed, and the reason I have a bunk bed is so that when someone comes over, they can come hang out too. And it's not something I could do in the past. Now I actually have a space, so it's kind of cool to be able to offer it back in return when I am in town.
So you have, this is your actual, like, you have a lease. Your name is on a lease in an apartment in the Castro, right?
Yeah, I have a roommate, so she's the master tenant. I am under her lease.
Okay.
But I do have a room, and in my room I have a mattress and a bed for myself, but a bunk bed specifically dedicated if people visit. I actually have a friend over right now from New York, and I stayed at his place 6 weeks ago. I met him while kite surfing in Turks and Caicos, and he's here
where is
visiting. Turks and Caicos?
Yeah.
It's in the Caribbean. It's just one of the islands there, and then we're kite surfing.
So, okay, I want you to do a quick drop list of all your favorite activities that you've done around the world. Kite surfing, fire breathing.
Roof topping.
What's roof topping?
When you climb on top of rooftops and you just hang out there. You know those crazy Russians, what they do? Like climbing cranes is amazing.
You mean the guys with like the YouTube videos where they're like hanging off a...
Yeah. Well, I don't hang. I just stand on the edges, and I'm very happy. But yeah, I love high places.
So without rope?
No rope.
What if a gust of wind comes?
Well, here's the thing. This is the funny thing about being on a high place is that it feels more dangerous, but it isn't more dangerous. If you were standing on a 1 foot wide or 1.5 foot wide slab of concrete in a playground, 1 foot above the ground, you would stand there forever and be safe. If you sat on the edge of a chair, which is the same as the edge of a building, how often have you fallen off a chair? You just don't fall. Even if you look down at the floor, you don't fall. So it's all in your mind, actually. A lot of it is in the mind, even with a gust of wind.
Well, how come it's... I remember there's these... I guess, is there a difference between... those camps where you're supposed to climb up this log,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get to the top and you're supposed to stand on top of the log. So it's like maybe the total diameter is less than a foot.
Yeah.
But because it's a straight log, it's really shaky at the top.
Yeah, but a high-rise isn't shaky. It's
Okay.
like steel beams. Yeah, it's super, super rigid. Now, a crane is different. A crane is... the arm is always unlocked.
Right.
Because if not, it would snap in the wind. So that's kind of wobbling on you. But the beams the beams there are also pretty thick. It's not. It's a little stupid, but for me, the idea of being on a high place, I've slowed down a lot. I'm on a visa here, so if I ever get arrested somewhere, I would get in a lot of trouble. I'd probably lose my visa and I wouldn't be able to come into the United States. So that would be a problem. So I've sort of stopped doing it. But
because you're technically a Canadian citizen.
I'm still Canadian.
Okay.
I'm Canadian on an O1 visa here, and if you have any sort of criminal record,
Yeah.
you can't even transfer through the U.S.
Talking about this stuff is not going to incriminate you, right?
I do not know. But no, those were my best experiences. Was just being on a super high place,
Yeah.
standing down. It's the most vivid memories. There is no better way to be in the present moment than when your life depends on it.
Okay, keep going. Keep going on the list. Yeah.
Scuba diving, like diving with sharks, diving in shipwrecks, really, really cool.
What's so cool about it?
I think just being underwater, the first time you go on a scuba dive, I think just really feels like you're almost exploring space. You're weightless. You're kind of, zero gravity, floating around, completely untethered, and you can explore a world and a landscape that just doesn't exist anywhere else. It's just the most surreal thing to be able to see this whole new landscape that I think is really, really cool.
What's something that you saw and that almost in your mind just made like, I know, just made you feel like, I know nothing about this universe. There's so much in this universe that we just don't know and don't understand.
Like underwater?
Yeah.
Or just in general?
In underwater or in general, yeah.
Underwater, I don't know. My mind doesn't really think in that way. I think I just remember particular memory was swimming through these underwater arches and structures. So it's not like a cave exactly, but it's like it's an arch. And to be able
like
to
a rock formation,
like a rock,
coral,
yeah, or like just huge rock formations that you would just swim between, and you're navigating in between these, and it's just the same sensation I would assume a base jumper would feel as they're flying, except a lot slower. It really felt more just like an entire unexplored world that was constantly changing, currently now under threat. I was watching the most depressing thing ever 2 days ago, Chasing Coral.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Have you seen it? By the year 20...
No, it's a documentary, right?
It's a documentary.
Which is it on Netflix? Or?
It's on Netflix right now. It's basically projecting that we've already currently in the last 30 years lost 30% of our coral reefs.
I thought it's more now.
Well, I think the statistic you see online is the Great Barrier Reef. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's going to be coral reefs in the next 100 years, give or take. That's what people are projecting, more or less.
What?
They can't survive a 2-degree rise in temperature.
Does it make you sad because you've seen it and you know the life that it can give, or? I
don't think it's about a question of sadness. I think it's a question of survival. I mean, if like 50% of the world's oxygen comes from plankton, which is in the ocean.
50%?
Yeah, half of the world's oxygen comes from the ocean. Basically, if the corals die, which it's the bedrock of all life. It's kind of like trees. So corals die, small fish die, big fish die, plankton die, everything dies. I mean, like, you're looking at basically, if the oceans die, then what happens to all the food that it generates for 10% of the population or 20% of the population, and the oxygen and everything along? I just think there are these huge consequences that we don't know what's coming up. I think nature's pretty resilient, but if I don't know. It's weird. So I do environmental projects. I try to do things around social impact, but I have no kids, and I don't plan on having any. I don't believe in the afterlife or spirituality or anything of that, and so there's no ethical compulsion to make a difference, nor is there any really, I'm gonna die in 100 years, so why even try? But it just feels so necessary to do something, even without expecting any chance of victory or any, I don't know, the world's seems to be in pretty dire straits when you look at a lot of the information about everything from the rise of plastics going into the ocean, microplastics, choking up the seas, and overfishing, overconsumption in general, the boom in population, add extreme weather events and climate change and all these other things. I mean, the planet that we're leaving behind is not very exciting, but I don't know. I'm just rambling.
No. This is
yeah.
because I think you have a unique perspective. I think people I think who've had the opportunity and the privilege. I don't know. I'm using the word privilege. I think the ability to be mobile and move around is such a gift, and I think it's and the stories that I'm hearing from you, like, clearly you're not squandering that gift, and I think you have that unique perspective. So when there's a difference, I think, between a kid in high school who's just seen a documentary about reef dying, but then there's you who you dove to a place where you saw the reefs, right, and you've seen different people in different situations in their living conditions, and realizing this is a young kid from this place that I don't think he's going to be able to. He's going to suffer because of what we've done to this planet. Like this 3-year-old kid that I just met in whatever city in whatever country, because of how much we fucked up over the last.
Yeah. And the inequality gap is only getting worse. I mean, there needs to be so much change in one direction that I don't really know if we're going to solve it. There needs to be like some kind of a quantum element that resolves this, but based on our generational progress, which is kind of how things have been. You need to wait kind of for the old ideas to die for the new ones to kind of take root. At the rate that we're screwing things up, I don't really think there's going to be much hope. But I don't know. I may be just a pessimist.
No, I think
like society evolves generationally. That's how each subsequent government is evolved or brainwashed or otherwise. It's all by generations, and exponential growth of humanity and consumption and increase in inequality and all these other factors that we're adding in for all the really cool developmental changes that we're implementing. I mean, how many of the Fortune 500 are making the planet a better place? Probably zero. Like actual, like specifically with improving the conditions for the future generation. Like not so much, like a lot of it is present focused. That's just how the world works, right? It's how the capitalist model functions.
Yeah.
So
I think there's been this weird thing for like the innovation for the sake of innovation, but when that word is being used, I'm not sure what they're referring to sometimes.
Yeah, it's a little tough. So I don't know. It's a pretty it's weird. It's weird place to be. And because I'm in the privileged position of, I guess, even being able to consider the fate of the planet. Most people can't even think about that. They're thinking about how to put food on the table and, how to feed their family and house them and stuff. It just feels pretty depressing. So try to do the best that you can with what you have, I suppose, and leave the world slightly better than how much you've screwed it up. I mean, I've read in many places that the best thing you can do for the planet is not reproduce, because the amount of waste a single human generates over their lifetime is absolutely phenomenal. And it's like, oh, well, I hope that I'm paying my own dues. but I don't know. I don't know.
I think I'm in company that would also understand kind of my view, because when I tell my like friends that I grew up with, I'm like, I don't want kids. Why would I want to bring a kid into this world? The common dialogue is like, oh, but like it's like, Jeff, I'm sure you're gonna meet someone and you're gonna want to have a kid. It's just that feeling. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm never going to change my mind about not. I might, if a kid is in need of a like adoption or having it being like part of a family.
Yeah.
Cool, but I'm not going to make a new kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm in the same page. I feel like the child experience, and this is a very unpopular view, is that the experience or the desire to bring a child into the world is a selfish one. It's entirely because I want to feel what it's like to be a mother. I want to feel like what it's like to have a family. I want to feel that experience of bonding, this experience that everyone talks about. It's a very selfish desire. And I'm also of the opinion that, if you want a family, if you really want to just improve someone's life and cultivate that, then just go adopt someone. But it's unpopular. It gets a lot of frowns, and it's not. It makes bad dinner conversation.
You're leaving town in like a few days, right?
I was going to actually. I was supposed to be in Russia on the 15th. And I realized that I had too much work to do, so I canceled that trip. But I will be going to Utah on the 26th.
Is work meaning like editing?
Work means whatever. I'm basically a one-man army, so whether that's marketing, editing,
cool,
whatever.
Okay.
In this specific instance, I'm video editing.
Cool. So,
I can show you what it looks like.
Yeah, I would love it. I would love to see this. No, because I was gonna say, We're definitely at the hour, the end of the little session here, and I want to go on for 5 more hours and just jam with you. So I definitely think everyone listening can look forward to Mr. Ben Wong Part 2.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure, because I know, again, like you said, you're never in the same place for more than, was it 6 days?
6 weeks.
6 weeks, yeah. Right? I want to thank you so much, and we end every episode with the same question as well.
Uh-oh.
And that is, ultimately, what's the point of all of this?
Yeah, that's a question I struggle with all the time. And I saw a TED Talk that really resonated with me, and that's how I've decided to live my life. It says we should think of our lives basically like 2 covers of a book. Like a book, where we have a front cover, which is when we're born, and we have a back cover when we die. And ultimately, what we can hope for within the span of this story that is our lives is to tell the best story that we possibly can. And just because nobody reads the book, or just because everybody reads the book, or just because we're done reading the book, doesn't make the story any better or worse. And so what we can aspire for is to tell a great story. And so that's how I live my life.
Okay, gang, that's this episode with Ben. Thanks for your support. As always, this episode is available or download on my site, on iTunes, on Google Play, or TuneIn Radio. Please subscribe on any of those channels, or wherever you're listening to this, and I'll keep you posted with new episodes. Lastly, remember to send me ideas or subscribe to my mailing list on www.talkhuman2.me. Okay, hugs, fist bumps. Bye now.